Hello, this is Philosophical Rebellion. This October 7th marks 2 years of Israel's genocide in Gaza. So I wanted to take this opportunity to look back on what actually happened that day. Because what happened that day in Israel has been used every single day since then to justify the genocide that Israel is committing in Gaza. And anytime you bring up the war crimes Israel is committing in Gaza to Palestinians, the response is always, but what about October 7th? So now it's been 2 years and we've actually learned a whole lot about what really happened on October 7th, what the Israeli government knew about that attack before it happened, and Netanyahu's long-term plan to prop up Hamas and funnel them billions and billions of dollars. But the story I really want to tell starts with Benjamin Netanyahu's rise to power in Israel, because he came to power by advocating for Israeli domestic extremists to assassinate the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin because he was engaging in the peace process with the Palestinians. And Netanyahu did not accept the idea of a Palestinian state as legitimate. So he came to power as a religious fundamentalist, saying that there should be absolutely no Palestinian state. There should be no peace with Palestinians. And his campaign inspired Israeli domestic extremists to assassinate their own prime minister for engaging in the two-state solution. Then, after Benjamin Netanyahu rose to power and was elected as their prime minister after Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, he promised that he would prevent Palestinian statehood, and he repeatedly campaigned as Mr. Security, saying that he would keep the Israeli people safe from the Palestinians, who he described as evil, monstrous barbarians with no rational thought process, who purely want to kill as many Jewish Israelis as possible. So he concocted this whole propaganda narrative about how Palestinians were not partners for peace. And the only reason that there was not peaceful coexistence was because the Palestinians refused it. And one of the main ways he tried to perpetuate that stereotype was by channeling billions and billions of dollars to organizations like Hamas, which he viewed as the most violent extremists possible to govern Gaza. So he propped them up and kept them in power so that he could point to them and say that they were not partners for peace. Israel maintained an air, land, and sea blockade of Gaza. And under Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership, they became universally known as an apartheid state. So Benjamin Netanyahu governed and led an apartheid government. And that whole time, Benjamin Netanyahu continued to say he was Mr. Security and he would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. So Palestinians were living under Israeli apartheid subjugation. Benjamin Netanyahu governed Gaza, saying that he would never allow a Palestinian state, and he propped up with billions of dollars the most violent groups he could within the Palestinian population for the specific talking point that they were not partners for peace. And under that apartheid occupation, the Palestinian people never stopped working for nonviolent revolution. People often ask, where's the Palestinian Nelson Mandela? And if you ask the Palestinians, they would say that he is in an Israeli prison, being held illegally and likely tortured on a daily basis. But the Palestinians pushed the world for change using the boycott, divestment, sanction movement, asking for the world to apply the same exact tools used to end South African apartheid on Israeli apartheid. But the world ignored the Palestinian people. So they launched the Great March of Return, and under Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership, the Great March of Return, non-violent protests among the Palestinians, was met with Israeli sniper fire and tank shells. So all Palestinian pleas for non-violent political reform were met with silence or with violence. So just like JFK said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And around 2020 was really when Benjamin Netanyahu's plans for the total forced displacement of all Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank was coming to fruition. And Benjamin Netanyahu campaigned on what he called applying Israeli sovereignty over the entire territory from the river to the sea. So, since early 2020, Benjamin Netanyahu had been publicly stating that he planned to take over the entire territory that Palestinians were living in and forcibly displace the people there. He just needed a way to kickstart that process. And that's where October 7th came in. Hamas had witnessed the BDS movement fail and the Great March of Return fail. So, when all nonviolent political reform failed, Hamas viewed their last option as using their right to armed resistance against Israeli apartheid occupation as their only option. So in 2022, Hamas created a detailed plan for their attack. And Israel, being a very sophisticated military, got their hands on that Hamas battle plan right away. So the Israeli military had the Hamas battle plan a year before the attack happened. And that battle plan was then sent to multiple Israeli leaders in September 2023, the month before the attack, when Israel was already bombing Gaza. This is incredibly important to remember. Israel moved dozens of troops away from the southern border to the West Bank weeks before the Hamas attack happened. Then, 10 days before the attack happened, in the end of September, Egypt warned Israel of an imminent attack from within Gaza. The United States reiterated that warning to Israel. So, within 10 days before the attack of October 7th, Israel was warned by the United States and Egypt of an imminent attack from within Gaza. Then, the Israeli Shin-bet warned Israeli leadership of a mass Hamas mobilization the night before the attack. So, October 6th, 2023, the Israeli military leadership knew that there was a mass mobilization within Gaza of Hamas militants. That's in addition to them having warnings from Egypt and the United States of an imminent attack, as well as detailed Hamas battle plans. So, October 6th, the Israeli military knew absolutely everything it needed to know to prevent any deaths on October 7th. But instead of doing that, instead of trying to protect their own citizens, the Israeli government took a different approach. The Nova Music Festival wasn't planned for October 7th. It was a music festival that was supposed to end on the 6th. So what the Israeli military chose to do was extend the music festival an extra day and put it in between them and Hamas. So the Israeli military extended the Nova Music Festival an extra day to October 7th, knowing that the attack was coming after having moved their own troops away from the border. And I don't think this shit could be stressed enough. Israel knew what the attack would look like. They knew the attack was coming. And instead of trying to protect their own people, they withdrew their troops and put unarmed civilians in their place. So then what happened was Hamas tried to attack Israeli military bases and were completely surprised that there were so many unarmed civilians at a music festival. They did not know there was a music festival. The music festival wasn't planned the day before. So then you had Hamas trying to enter a war zone, and in the heat of war, some of their militants killed a whole bunch of civilians. And after Hamas broke into Israeli-controlled occupied territories, other Palestinian groups broke in also and committed their own attacks on civilians. But those civilians never should have been there, and they were only placed there because the Israeli military put them there on purpose. So then what happened after Hamas broke in to the Nova Music Festival was the Hannibal Directive. Israeli military helicopters unloaded 28 entire weapons payloads indiscriminately on concertgoers at the Nova Music Festival and Hamas militants who were there. That means in repeated strafing runs, Apache helicopters unloaded every single bit of ammunition loaded up at the bases, just on everybody and all the cars coming from that music festival. So the vast majority of the deaths at that festival were actually due to Israeli Apache helicopters shooting on their own citizens after being ordered to employ the Hannibal Directive. Same thing with Israeli civilians in the kibbutz, because the Israeli military deployed their own tanks to meet Hamas militants. And whenever those tanks would see a few civilians held up with militants in a house, they would just shoot the house, bomb it, explode it, and then say it was Hamas's fault all those people died. Well, if the Israeli tank didn't shoot a shell into that house and blow it up, they would probably still be alive. So when Israel shoots on all their own civilians, it can't always be blamed on Hamas. Israel likely killed more people on October 7th who were innocent Israeli civilians than Hamas did. Because Hamas actually had a battle plan to go to Israeli military bases, take military hostages, and then immediately trade them for all the Palestinian hostages held in Israeli administrative detention. Because prior to October 7th, Israel was already holding thousands of Palestinian hostages. Not prisoners of war, not terrorists convicted of crimes, hostages. So, this October 7th, the most important things for you to know are that Israel could have prevented the attack. Israel chose to put its own innocent civilians in front of their own military, knowing the Hamas attack was coming. When the Hamas attack happened on October 7th, Israel started using the Hannibal Directive and indiscriminately killed all of their own civilians as well as any Hamas militants who were there. And this was all part of Netanyahu's long-term plan to annex all Palestinian territory and forcibly displace the Palestinians who were living there. He campaigned for years on applying Israeli sovereignty on all occupied Palestinian territories, and October 7th was his opportunity, which he used to justify the start of this genocide. Benjamin Netanyahu is the modern-day Adolf Hitler. He is guilty of the same crime of extermination, and he has been playing the world like a fiddle for the last 20 years. It's time everybody sees him for what he is, a genocidal maniac. Never again is happening right now, and Benjamin Netanyahu is criminally responsible for it, and he has been working for this genocide for the past several decades. He created the circumstances to provoke the October 7th attack. He enabled the October 7th attack to happen, also that he could use the October 7th attack to kickstart this genocide that he's been planning his entire career. Benjamin Netanyahu needs to be stopped, and the world needs to stop him.